Welcome to the next segment of our interview with military and security expert Sunil Ram. He's a former officer with the Canadian military, now works with the international consulting firm Alexis International. Welcome, Sunil. So in the first segment of the interview, we talked about what it would take to organize the attacks on Mumbai. And we talked just a little bit about the context of Barack Obama having a plan to create a peace deal over Kashmir that would free up Pakistani troops to go fight on the Afghan border. And we left off the first segment by saying, okay, now this gun has been readied, a year of training or more, recruiting people, a very elaborate operation. It could easily be a 2-year ramp up to create something like this, one would think. And so the question is, why pull the trigger now, and who pulled the trigger now? So why don't we start with why now, and talk a little bit about the context. And again, it's this issue of, to start with, it's Obama's coming into power in the United States, and he sees this grand plan to free up Pakistani troops to have a big assault in the tribal areas on the Afghan border. So tell us how the Mumbai attacks might affect that.
Well, rather simply, Pakistan's raison d'etre from its creation has always been the war against India and Kashmir. The military-industrial complex within Pakistan has always used the argument that if the Pakistan military is not all-powerful, it will not be able to defend Kashmir against an Indian onslaught. Whether that fact is true or not is somewhat irrelevant. But that is the argument that's always been given. Therefore, the Pakistan military has always been able to take the lion's share of the Pak economy so that it can maintain this facade that it offers in Kashmir. Now, if they are forced to withdraw large numbers of forces, because there's between 500,000 to 1 million troops that face off on the Kashmir frontier.
How many on each side?
Usually it's around 250,000 on each side, minimum. But those numbers vary depending on the stress levels between India and Pakistan at any given moment. The numbers have risen to upwards of 1 million.
So let's just remind our viewers, Obama's plan, as articulated by Obama and some of his advisors, seemed to be heading in a direction that if Pakistan withdrew some forces from the Kashmir border, then India would do the same. And there'd be this kind of mutual pulling back, and then, in theory, these Pakistan troops would go up and help the Americans fight.
Absolutely. Now, if, from the thinking of the Pakistan military, if there is a withdrawal from Kashmir, one of the arguments they've always used for their defense of Pakistan ceases to be, because it proves that India is willing to withdraw forces.
And it suggests that there's a resolution to the Kashmir crisis.
Exactly. So one of the major outlets for radical Islamists that the Pakistan military has always used has been the Kashmir region. So that breaks down some of the arguments they make, which gives the moderates a case for further thawing with India, which has, of course, been going on recently. The current situation now allows the Pakistan military to say, we can't do this, because India, of course, politically is in a very awkward position. There's an election coming up. So any government that says, all right, we're going to withdraw troops from Kashmir, when clearly the LET has been implicated in this attack, a Kashmir-based radical Islamic group, how can a government say, well, no, we're going to reduce security in Kashmir from the very place that these people came from? It's a political hot potato. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's logical, but from a base perspective, it's hard for India to do that. Therefore, Pakistan now has deniability, saying, look, if India won't withdraw, we won't withdraw, so we can't help you in Afghanistan.
So a year to 2 years ago, somebody has this plan to attack Mumbai and starts all the wheels in motion, which takes money, it takes military know-how, it takes
military intelligence. To be blunt.
Now, you can speculate in various ways, and you could argue at what, a little bit gets into what is the ISI, assuming the ISI is involved in some way. Everyone seems to be assuming at least some sections or elements in the ISI will have some involvement. Talk a little bit about how, just from again from a kind of practical point of view, how does one set these wheels in motion to create this?
Well, first you come up with a plan. You have a think group or a think tank that sits down and you say, well, if we wanted to effect a certain type of attack to hit an economic center somewhere, how would we do it?
And the logic would be, how do we promote a conflict between India and Pakistan in a way that would at the very least tie up the troops in Kashmir, or perhaps more, create some kind of an emergency?
Well, I think it probably started at a much more lesser level. The first thing is, how do we create chaos and cause pain? And Pakistan has a long history of doing this to India, for the simple reason that from a practical military sense, Pakistan can never win a conventional war. It's a pure numbers issue, if nothing else. There are just simply more Indian soldiers than there are Pakistani. But the empirical evidence, of course, is that Pakistan has lost every major conventional conflict against India. Therefore, they have shifted to a more asymmetric way of attacking India to keep a level of instability, so there is no ability to really thaw over the issue of Kashmir, and that then continues to be the raison d'etre for the Pakistan military. Now, in terms of the planning, you start with an idea which becomes a plan. The plan grows depending on the shifting needs or interests of the planning group and the instructions they get from a higher level, because there is a leadership element, whether it's government or some radical group, it doesn't matter. There's an objective that is given, in this case, pain to India, to put it at a simple level. However, all these plans, dependent on time and circumstance, morph. And they certainly have a tendency to become more and more elaborate sometimes. You know, the idea is to keep them simple, but the history of special forces operations since the inception of the ideas, even potentially going back to ancient times, you tend to see a simple plan that becomes quite complex. And a part of the complexity is seen in the number of attacks within a zone which overwhelmed the security services of India. And frankly, they would overwhelm the security services of any Western state as well. We only have so many special forces and SWAT teams available within a time frame of moving them from point A to point B to a target zone. Another aspect of that is the impact on the local emergency services. They get overwhelmed. Where do the fire brigades and ambulances go when you hit 6 different locations? And then the population base. These are highly concentrated population bases in megacities. It creates chaos on the street, restricting the movement of the police and military forces and the emergency forces to react. This is very well thought out in that sense. When you look at the movements of the individual groups that attacked, in the small numbers that they attacked in. So this was a complex plan, well thought out, pre-planned. Clearly there had to be a pre-execution of it. You can't just go and do this from paper.
Well, in the next segment of our interview, let's talk about how will this affect Obama's plan for Kashmir. Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Sunil Ram.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the powers in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars and into environmental disaster, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Real hope means facing a complex reality. Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute. Visit therealnews.com.